Hello and welcome to the East Anglian Model Railway. In a previous video I talked about locomotive bargains you could get from the likes of Hornby and Bachmann buying second hand, and here's one incidentally that I bought a couple of years ago. It cost me about £50 plus £3 or £4 postage and packing, and it's a beautiful Bachmann V2, a very powerful locomotive, runs quite smoothly but it's a bit noisy. But today I want to focus on rolling stock, and in particular today I'll focus on coaches, carriages, whatever you want to call them. I'll just move the locomotive forward and you'll see what's coming next. Now, probably one of the best value coaches you can buy these days is the old Hornby Grizzly coaches that were made originally in Margate in the UK. Since then they brought out some really beautiful super detailed teak models that cost, well, upwards of £40 even second hand and £60-70 new. Although the BR versions are cheaper. But these are the old LNER versions that they mass-produced in train sets, Flying Scotsman train set, usually with 3, maybe sometimes 4 of these coaches. Now, all the ones I own have been sort of repainted slightly because I don't personally like the teak finish on the originals. Although back in the late 70s when they came out, I thought they were brilliant. But I've repainted mine, and it's surprising how good they can look. They can blend in well with a coach of other kit-built, a train of other kit-built coaches. So I don't mind them being slightly dirty or slightly weathered, that slightly weathered look. Anyway, Hornby produced, I think, 3 different models of the Grizzlies in their original version, that the composite brake, the composite and the sleeper, and they still to this day I think look very good. I prefer the sort of repainted look rather than the original self-coloured plastic, but it's up to you. You can pick these up for well under a tenner. Typically you might be able to get 3 for £20 off eBay. Don't spend too much. Now, in a previous video some time ago, I talked about how I improved them a bit with my painting of the sole bars and of slightly altering the underframe. But I think for, let's say, 3 for £20, they are absolute bargain coaches. And you can see that first one has actually got, it's actually had proper vents on the top of the roof, so the originals were scraped off and it's had metal ones replacing it. You don't need to do that, to be honest, but I just thought I'd try and see how good I can make it. And there we have another one, slightly richer colour, and a third one, and the fourth coach in this happens to be an Kirk kit, an all third, and I show that because at the moment Kirk kits, the ones that are already made, you can often pick them up for between £10 and £15. Not always. If it's an unusual model, they'll probably go for more, the ready-made ones. But if you look on eBay, if you search eBay Kirk kits, you will find, or LNER kit-built coaches, you will find some of these from time to time, or quite a few sometimes. You'll see a whole collection might be being sold off. And these are also a good way of getting a cheap, realistic coach. So, there we go. There's a little 4-coach train. I'll get that moving and you can enjoy that going past. And talking of Kirk kits, here is a Suburban passenger train with 6 Kirk ready-made coaches. I must say they do look quite nice. I think they're much cheaper than buying the Hornby teak Suburban coaches. Again, they cost at least £40 each, second hand, £40 to £50. And brand new. If they re-release them, there's a real shortage of them, but if they do re-release them, they'll probably be £60-70 at least. first 4 coaches in this train are actually articulated coaches, which are quite rare, and therefore they cost me a bit more. But the last 2, a composite and a brake third, they worked out about £13 each, I think, and I really like them. Now, Hornby also produced quite a lot of other coaches at the same time as the Grizzly coaches that they introduced in the late 70s. And quite a few of these are also, in fact, I think they've all at one time or other been available in the railroad range. And here is a ex-Southern Railway composite coach. And I think those are, yeah, they're not perfect, but if you get one of the more recent ones made in China, you'll find that the livery is very nicely applied. Yeah, they make nice coaches, and they are, you can pick them up for, well, under a tenner. Now, they also made some very nice GWR ones. Again, the later ones tend to have a nicer livery application, so look for those, and also tend to have nicer metal wheels. They also produced a couple of LMS coaches, and they've probably been around for the longest. They seem to appear all the time. I don't quite like the LMS coaches so much, and there is a better alternative, I would say, from the old Airfix models, which are now produced by Dapol, but I'll come on to them later. Now, if you model railways from any time from the 1950s through to the sort of 1990s, or 1980s at least, you probably want some British Rail Mk1 coaches. Now, Hornby have produced these in their range, since the early 1970s, and before that, Triang produced them. Now, if you come across the very early Triang ones, avoid them like the plague, because they weren't very attractive, they weren't very realistic, they didn't run very well, and they had great big thick wheels that don't work well on modern track work. You might say, I can replace those thick wheels with newer metal ones, but by the time you've bought 4 metal wheels for that coach, you'll find you've spent as much money as you did on the original coach. So I would avoid them. Now, this is an early Hornby, probably with Triang Hornby maybe even, produced in the 70s. It's proper scale length, unlike the early Triang ones, which are too short. And it's got the obvious, the normal Triang Hornby big couplings, tension lock couplings. Now, this one's quite old, and therefore you can probably see that some of the lining is wearing away. I'll just zoom in a bit on that. Is that focusing all right? Yeah, the lining is worn away. Now, these coaches are all right, but one of the problems was Hornby didn't make many in the range. They made brake seconds, composites, sleepers and buffet cars. So there's a bit of a limited range, and they used to produce them also. The maroon ones they used to paint up as LMS, and the chocolate and yellow ones they used to call GWR, even though they were never, and the Mk1 coach didn't come into being until well after the GWR and so on. So the earlier ones are okay. You might find, though, that you can pick up one of the later ones that have got flush glazing. They're made in China. They've got much finer lining on them. They're just a much better coach, and they'll come with metal wheels, hopefully. If they have the wide... Oh, that's not on the track properly. If they have the wide coupling, then they are not the most recent Mk1 coaches that Hornby have produced. But these ones can be picked up at a very good price. I paid about £12 for one of these. In fact, I bought 5 of these coaches, not all brake thirds, brake seconds, whatever they are. But I bought 5 of them, and it cost me about £60. And I thought, well, that's a full train for £60, and they are in virtually mint condition, and they've got nice metal wheels. They run very well. I'll show you a train running. So I've got a rake of 5 Mk1 coaches being pulled by Flying Scotsman. Another train, another locomotive you can pick up at absolute bargain prices. I paid about £28 for this plus postage. It's 10 to drive. It's a great runner, and I've had a few of these over the years. A couple of them which I've converted into other A1s or A3s, but this is my straight Flying Scotsman at the moment, A1. Now, it's a bit incongruous pulling the Mark 1 coaches, because by the time it got to the Mark 1 coaches, Flying Scotsman didn't look like that anymore, but it doesn't matter. Now, of my 5 coaches, the first 2 are from the Hornby Railroad range. Hornby brought out a brand new Mark 1 coach about 10 to 15 years ago, made in China, much finer scale, nice underframe, nice flush glazed windows, really good value as well. They came out brand new in about, I'm thinking about 2015 or something like that, and they came out for about £17 then. They're probably about £30 now, I'm guessing, although they're not producing, I don't think, at the moment, but they produced a nice variety of different coaches as well, a much bigger range than they produced before. They've got beautiful lining, beautiful livery application. The railroad versions only have plastic wheels. That doesn't bother me too much. You can sometimes pick up more recent versions that they produce with metal wheels, but they run well, as do the previous range that I was showing you a minute ago. So let's get Flying Scotsman going. Nice smooth start. Don't know why I stopped her there. I'll get her going in. So here's a close-up of one of the Hornby Railroad Mark 1 coaches. I can definitely recommend them. Beautifully fine, detailed lining and everything like that, and not too many extra detail parts that easily get broken or lost. They were designed or intended to be, realistic but good, I would say, train set coaches. They look the part, but they're not going to get broken every time you touch them. And yeah, you probably won't find these particularly cheap. You probably won't find them for much less than £20. But if you are patient, you never know. Don't buy the first ones you see, is always what I suggest. If you aren't sure how to distinguish them from earlier coaches that aren't so good, the wheels are usually a good sign. The earlier coaches have chunkier wheels. Also, look at the lining and look at the windows. The windows of the more recent models are flush glazed, and the lining is very fine, the yellow, black, yellow line, whereas back in the 1970s it was just one yellow line down the middle and not a lot more. So, Hornby Mark 1 coaches, the more recent ones, I can thoroughly recommend. Another great bargain coach you can get from Hornby, I haven't got any on show at the moment, I'm afraid they're in a box in the attic, and that is the Pullman coaches that Hornby still produce in the railroad range, or have done recently, but they are correct scale length, they're absolutely beautiful livery. The only thing they don't have over the super detailed models is they don't have lights, and they don't have all the extra loose parts like handrails. Now, I used to own a couple of the super detailed Hornby coaches, and I found that I bought them second hand. The things that got broken on them were the handrails, and the other thing that wasn't particularly good on them was the couplings. They had a fancy coupling system that tended to sag and just didn't work as well as these railroad ones. And that reminds me of another thing, the Hornby Railroad Grizzlies, they couple so closely together. You get a really realistic looking train with coaches almost touching each other. Round a bend like this, of course, the gap between two coaches is really exaggerated. But these couple reasonably closely, and if you get the railroad ones, you can get closer couplings, because the railroad ones you can swap out the couplings for different ones. The older Hornby Mark 1s you can't, and the Hornby older Pullman coaches that I say I like, you can't swap the couplings. They are permanently part of the bogie moulding, but they're still good coaches. I mentioned Hornby LMS coaches a while back. They're okay, the railroad ones, but I prefer the ex-Airfix ones. Now this one, and incidentally, the ex-Airfix ones are now available via Dapol, and you can buy them either ready-made sometimes, or you can pick them up as kits. And I say kits, they're pre-painted. You do need a bit of glue to stick some of the roof vents on, I believe. But apart from that, they're kind of ready to go. So here is one that I picked up as a bunch of spares. It was missing its glazing and it was unpainted, or I can't remember what it was. So I painted it myself, not particularly well, I hasten to add, but it'll do me. Yeah, it was missing its glazing, and so I paid about £5 for it. But it's not bad. It's scale length. It's got, you know, separately fitted roof vents. It looks realistic from above, and I'm perfectly happy with it. Now, Airfix produced 2 sort of corridor coaches and I think 2 suburban coaches in LMS livery and in British Rail Midland Region livery as well. And they're very good. When they came out in sort of late 70s, people thought they were absolutely fantastic compared to what Hornby offered at the time. So that gives you an idea of why I prefer these to the Hornby Railroad versions. Incidentally, if you're a GWR fan, Airfix also produced a lovely auto coach and a B set. Oh, that's 2 suburban coaches normally running together. And they also produced some what's called centenary stock. That was mainline stock that ran on certain Great Western main lines. I'm not sure. I'm not an expert. I think they ran to the sort of Cornish Riviera, that sort of thing. But if you can find any of those coaches and they're in reasonable condition, they should be excellent value. I think one of the newer companies like Rapido or Accurascale, I think it's Rapido, have brought out a B-set coach now, and each coach will cost you about £70. Now, for that, well, for about £20, you could get 2 Airfix B-set coaches, and they're not bad at all. Sometimes I've noticed they wobble a bit. I'm not quite sure what I can do about them wobbling a bit from side to side, you know. But overall, they look really good. Now, next to that Airfix coach, there is one of 3 mainline coaches. This is a brake composite, or just brake third, I can't remember. And this is in, obviously, early BR livery. And these are nice panelled coaches from the LMS region. You might be able to see the panelling on them, I don't know. But they are really lovely coaches. They look particularly good in LMS livery, I have to say, but I've got them in BR early 50s. I've got 3 of those, a brake and 2 composites, and they are really nice coaches. Now, Mainline produced these in sort of late 70s, early 80s, and they've been produced by Bachmann since then. The only real difference with the Bachmann model is the Bachmann model has separately fitted roof vents, which of course looks slightly better, but add to the cost a bit. You can pick up the mainline ones for less than a tenner sometimes, and they are super coaches in my opinion. Slightly harder to find than the mainline or Airfix coaches is this one by Replica Railways. This was produced, I think, firstly produced in the 1990s. Bachmann may well have also produced this, but I think you can still pick up replica models of this. That's the brand Replica. This is called a vestibule third, I think. It's like a third open coach, and yeah, it just adds a bit of variety to a Midland Region train, because the mainline and the Airfix models were all, the main coaches were composites, so they're a mixture of first and third class accommodation, whereas this is an all third, which it would be a more common coach than a composite on a bigger express, I think. So that probably set you back a bit more, maybe £15. I think that's roughly what I paid for this. One trick, of course, is when you're buying coaches is don't just buy one. buy several and you'll save postage costs, and that applies even more to wagons. I tend to buy not just one coach at a time. I see a rake of 3, often from something like a train set, and that saves you a lot in postage costs. But this one I think I bought on its own, and I think it came boxed, but I think it was about £15 in total. But a really nice coach, nicely moulded, beautiful livery. What more could you ask for? Finally, I mentioned earlier about Ian Kirk coach kits, ready-made, often turn out quite cheap. The other very popular manufacturer of coach kits back in the day was Ratio. I think they are now owned by Pico, and they might be in the Parkside range or something like that. You can still get them. The mouldings are very old though, so when they get, well, I say they're very old, I'm assuming that they're still using the same machine tools, mouldings, whatever, that they used back in the day. And you get quite a lot of flash on them. They're not the easiest of kits to make. If you grew up with makes like Revell and Airfix building airplanes where everything's slotted together reasonably well. Anyway, I bought a set of 4 battered coaches in a sort of job lot, and they said they would need some work to get them up to running, and I found that I could make 2 decent chassis out of the 4, and there was a bit of glue and so on, so that the paintwork that I've redone them in isn't perfect. These are meant to be GWR coaches, incidentally, and but I decided I'd make them into sort of ex-LNER. Well, they could be Great Eastern or whatever, 4-wheel coaches, or North Eastern, because I've got a J72 pulling them. I just thought they could be something like that for a small local train. 2 of them, the chassis were too far gone to repair, so I made my own chassis out of old wagon chassis. They're not particularly realistic, but I don't care. Anyway, let's just see these. They're just a very, very good value alternative, especially when you see the price of the Hornby and the Genesis 4-wheel coaches. Incidentally, Hornby have for years produced in their railroad range, and before that just in their main range, some fairly toy-like 4-wheel coaches, but they only ever produced one body type, so there's no brake coach or anything like that. Although they are cheap, I'm not sure I would go for them. They're just kind of a bit oversized and toy-like. You say oversized, they're taller and wider than tiny little 4-wheel coaches should be. So there we are, just a few thoughts on how to pick up bargain coaches to improve your layout. So lastly then, just a few words about the kit-built, ready-made coaches you might find on eBay or at a toy fair, model railway exhibition, something like that. You may find you have to do a little bit of work to make them go round, say, train set curves. The Ian Kirk models weren't really designed for sort of second radius curves, but it doesn't take too much work to see how you can get around that problem, and I've done a video about building Ian Kirk coaches if you want to watch that. Also, the Ratio 4-wheel coaches, they come with rather crude plastic couplings, and you'll find that although they're only short 4-wheel coaches, if you use those plastic couplings, they won't go round even third radius curves, I don't think. So all mine have got the sort of Hornby tension locks attached. Well, I hope you found this useful. I'm sure there are other bargains out there on the coaching front, and I'm afraid I don't know anything about modern image, anything from sort of 1970s onwards, Mark II coaches. I know they've been produced by Airfix back in the day, and those were very good coaches. Apart from that, I can't tell you any more about more modern rolling stock, just the steam era for me. Okay, I hope you found this video useful. Bye for now.